Ostrich effect. This phrase, which has its roots in behavioral economics, describes people's propensity to ignore bad financial news, much like an ostrich would when it perceives a threat. In the context of business, it describes investors' efforts to steer clear of unfavorable financial information that could make them feel uncomfortable psychologically. For instance, investors might cease keeping an eye on their investments during a market slump. This is due to variations in returns in the fixed income market, according to researchers, who also claim that a reluctance to learning about possible short-term losses is the root reason of this unusual behavior. Research indicates that investors are more comfortable paying for the bliss of ignorance when there is no disclosure of risk associated with an investment. The ostrich effect is caused by a conflict between an individual's emotional perception of a painful experience and their rational thinking, as behavioral finance expert Sarah Newcomb, author of Loaded Money, Psychology, and How to Get Ahead Without Leaving Your Values Behind, explains. The paradox of frugality. The idea behind this is that a rainy day will arrive sooner if we save more for it. The truth is that everyone unavoidably starts cutting back on spending during a crisis. Additionally, when everyone starts saving more money at the same time, the economy's ability to grow is compromised since there will be less aggregate demand, which will lower output, employment, and labor compensation. The economist John Maynard Keynes examined this conundrum. He is credited as giving American housewives advice during the Great Depression, saying, "If you want your husbands to get jobs, buy yourself new dresses." Although Keynes himself was certain that the contradiction could only be resolved by the state's regulatory role, contemporary economists think that resource redistribution may be an effective solution. Allee's paradox. French economist and Nobel Prize laureate Maurice Allee deduced this paradox in his paper, The Behavior of a Rational Man in a Risky Situation. Evaluation of American School postulates an axioms, the reasonable man's approach to risk. An examination of American School postulates and axioms. In short, Allee's trials revealed that most recipients preferred to receive $99 with a 100% guarantee over $100 with a 99% guarantee. It makes sense. What good is taking a chance for a single dollar? But studies have shown that, even in situations when there is a high likelihood of an attractive outcome, people will nearly always select marginal dependability over the maximum chance of benefit. Psychologists that have investigated Allee's dilemma have discovered a general aversion to risk. People are more inclined to think about losses and how to minimize them when a subject is phrased in terms of profit and loss. Loss aversion is a phenomena that exists, yet learning to take calculated risks is essential to operating a profitable small business. Evattle's paradox. This is a very old problem in logic, stemming from ancient Greece. It is said that the famous sophist Protagoras took Evattle to teach him, with the clear understanding that the student would only be able to pay the teacher after he won his first case in court. Some experts say that Protagoras demanded money for teaching immediately after Evattle finished his studies. Others say that Protagoras waited for some time until it became obvious that the student did not make any effort to find clients, while others are sure that Evattle tried very hard but never found clients. In any case, Protagoras decided to sue Evattle to recover his debt. Protagoras claimed that if he won the case, he would be paid his money. If Evattle won the case, Protagoras would still receive his money according to the original contract because it would be Evattle's first winning case. Evattle, however, stood by the fact that if he won, he would not have to pay Protagoras under the judgment. If, on the other hand, Protagoras wins, then Evattle loses his first case, so he doesn't have to pay anything. So which of the men is right? The Buridan's donkey paradox. This is a figurative description of human indecision. It refers to the paradoxical situation in which a donkey, being between two haystacks of exactly the same size and quality, will starve to death because it cannot make a rational decision to eat. The paradox is named after the 14th century French philosopher Jean Buridan. However, he was not the author of the paradox. It had been known since the time of Aristotle, who, in one of his works, tells of a man who was hungry and thirsty, but since both feelings were equally strong, and the man was between eating and drinking, he was unable to make a choice. Buridan, for his part, never talked about this problem, but raised questions about moral determinism, which implied that a person faced with the problem of choice should certainly choose in the direction of the greater good. But Buridan allowed for the possibility of delaying the choice in order to evaluate all possible benefits. Later, other authors treated this view with satire, speaking of the donkey who, faced with two identical haystacks, would starve while making a decision. The time loop paradox. Paradoxes describing time travel have long been a source of inspiration for science fiction writers and the creators of science fiction movies and TV series. There are several variations of time loop paradoxes. One of the simplest and most obvious examples of such a problem is given in the book The New Time Travelers by David Toomey, a professor from the University of Massachusetts. Imagine that a time traveler bought a copy of Shakespeare's Hamlet in a bookstore. He then traveled to England during the time of Queen Elizabeth I and found William Shakespeare, who handed him the book. He transcribed it and published it as his own work. Hundreds of years pass, Hamlet is translated into dozens of languages, endlessly reprinted, and one of the copies turns up in the very bookstore where the time traveler buys it and gives it to Shakespeare, and the latter makes a copy, and so on. Who in this case should be considered the author of the immortal tragedy? The paradox of the book, a logical paradox, is contained in one of the plot twists of a novel by American writer Joseph Heller, which was published in 1961. The action takes place during World War II. A pilot tries to avoid participation in combat, pinning his hopes on a psychiatric examination that recognizes him as unfit. He tells his doctor about his attempts to withdraw from combat and stop flying. However, this is what confirms his sanity, according to experts. It is not the one who wishes to avoid aerial combat, but the one who craves it passionately, who can be recognized as insane. Thus, Captain Yossarian becomes hostage to mutually exclusive rules. In trying to prove his madness, he must be in the place and situation he seeks to avoid. The Fermi paradox. This phenomenon is being challenged more and more frequently and persistently as space is explored and knowledge of the universe expands. The paradox, formulated by physicist Enrico Fermi, is the contradiction between the high chance of life on other planets and the lack of any confirmation of this fact. It is established that in our galaxy alone, there are billions of stars forming their own systems with planets revolving around them. Given the number of celestial bodies, some civilization must have already reached such a level of development to be able to visit that part of space, which earthly scientists can observe, to record changes in it. Several explanations for this silence have been formulated: huge time expenditures for overcoming distances, as well as other accompanying difficulties. The principle of non-interference by highly developed civilizations in the life of Earthlings. The uniqueness of mankind. Aliens have already visited Earth. Aliens are still on our planet. Our and other civilizations have not been looking for each other long enough and persistently enough.